Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of Something Something with Eric Newman. Happy New Year. Excited to be rolling in the new year with new episodes of this podcast, which started in 2025. So we are officially a 2-year podcast. I'm very excited about that. And today we're going to discuss common mistakes when it comes to relationships. And I want to start with a story that I heard that my buddy told me, and I spent 2 days just like thinking about it. And like to him, it was just this sort of like offhand, oh, let me tell you what happened with this. Here's some gossip. And I just like got obsessed with it. And I started thinking about it very deeply. So I'm going to talk about it now. About 10 years ago, one of his good friends, one of his good buddies, got divorced. And immediately after the divorce, started hooking up with this woman he worked with who was married. She was married and she had kids at the time, okay? Which if you've seen our episode about cheating is wrong. It's wrong, okay? Lady who I've never met, who I've heard about only through a friend's friend. So this guy gets divorced, my buddy's friend gets divorced, starts hooking up with this woman at work. They have a year relationship. They basically start like, you know, it's the whole thing, the whole works, right? They get romantically entangled, they're obsessed with each other. A year goes by. Her husband tells her that they're moving to, I think they moved to somewhere in Europe. He had this like job opportunity. He was really, really wealthy. She had a place on Fifth Avenue. And, she told the guy that she was sleeping with, my friend's friend, about this. And like, she was like, yeah, I think I'm going to have to leave. And he got all upset and because they really had feelings for one another. I guess it was like down to the 9th hour and she kind of couldn't decide what to do. The husband had went to Europe a few days before she was supposed to move and go and follow him. So he goes to Europe. She's like taking care of all this stuff in the apartment. And she's like 99% sure she's going to end up going and staying with the husband. They have kids together, whatever. And the kids were there in Europe at that point. Right before she's about to leave and meet her husband in Europe, the other guy that she's sleeping with and has had this relationship with for a year apparently calls the husband and is basically like, yo, I know you don't know me. I've been sleeping with your wife for the last year at work. And rats out the woman and himself. Dude, my friend's telling me the story and I can't believe it. It's just so funny how quickly the dynamic can switch, right? I lost every bit of respect for this guy. And like, I know it's a fucked up thing to be the guy who's having sex with a married woman. And obviously that's morally wrong. And we can get more into that. But like, I lost so much respect for this guy. For calling the husband. I know that people do this, and I know it's like I think it's much more common that women do it. And I understand the reasoning behind it. Like, and I think women in particular kind of feel like, oh, we have to band together and this woman has no idea what's going on behind her back. So, and if I was in that position, I would want to know. So I'm going to tell her, even though we're not close or whatever. But like, I don't know, dude. There's something about a man doing it that it almost feels like against brotherhood. There's just something so not manly about it. So what's funny is that he tells me the story, and the first thing I think is, oh, the husband and her get divorced now, and now she's never going to want to be with this guy because he just did something so erratic and sort of like forced her hand and took matters into his own hands and just like blew up her life. Whatever relationships you're in are very personal to you. So if you're cheating on your spouse, which I think is incredibly wrong and fucked up, but if you're cheating on your wife or husband with someone else, your trust, even though it's having a relationship with someone on the side, having an affair, even though that starts on a fundamental basis of lying and deceit, it's not lying and deceit with the other person. So like, for example, this woman's cheating on her husband with this guy, even though it's fucked up and everything in her marriage, the relationship between her and the guy is its own foundation of trust and what to tell each other and what not to tell each other and how to communicate honestly and openly. So him going behind the woman's back to go to the husband to me is just like, it's like betrayal on top of betrayal. And so he tells me this, and I'm like, oh, okay. So husband and her get divorced, and she's single, and that's it. Never wants to talk to the other guy. They end up getting married. Her and the guy who ratted her out to her husband end up getting married. And he says he receives Christmas cards from them every year, like with their 2 kids on the Christmas cards. And I'm like, what the fuck, dude? And then he was like, well, he just did what needed to be done that she couldn't do. And I'm like, yeah, but you're betraying her, and you're also hurting this man so much. Like, it's not your responsibility to tell him that his wife is being unfaithful to him. Like, I just don't like that. It just rubbed me the wrong way. And I've been that guy on the other end of a woman who's in a relationship or married many times. And I've also been the guy who has been the one being unfaithful. And like with an ex in the past, I got caught like sending like sex messages to this woman. The woman contacted my ex and told her everything and sent the screenshots of our sex messages, which was a horrendous moment in my life. But dude, it was actually so funny. Like I wrote a joke about it one time. One of the things I said to the other woman was, I'll give you the best night of your life. And my ex sees it and goes, first of all, you won't. And second of all, night is not spelled Nite. I just hated the idea of all this. It was just a lot of deceit. And I think a lot of women, probably look at it as like, well, she's got kids now. So with the guy, so whatever had to happen, whatever sacrifices had to be made, in order for them to end up together, were worthy sacrifices, because the end result is a nice family with 2 children, which may be true. I don't know, but like, I just didn't like this, and it just like really rubbed me the wrong way. And obviously the cheating itself is one terrible thing, but then like add this on top, and it's just like 2 people who've shown their true colors getting into a relationship with one another, and then having 2 kids and sending a Christmas card with all of them smiling on it. And there's probably Santa. It almost makes the year of sneaking around, worse. Like, I don't know which betrayal is worse, because on one hand, like, she's betraying her husband, which is an awful betrayal. But on the other hand, she's chosen to trust someone and go through this experience of someone who's involved with her betrayal, who's an accomplice in her betrayal, and then turns around and goes, I'm gonna fucking tell him, like, when you don't get what you want. And you also look like you end up being the cuck. He ends up being the cuck in that situation, because now, instead of being the guy who's involved with a married woman and he's like the dominant and the married man is the cuck, he ends up being the guy who becomes so distraught over the idea that she's going to stay with the husband that he's willing to blow the whole world up in order to be with her. And it's like, I don't know. It makes him look so bad. I just cannot respect this guy, dude. I would rip up that Christmas card if I got it. I really would. Like, I can't. I don't know. It just bothered me so much. Being the other person in a cheating situation, being the other woman and being the other guy, it gets complicated sometimes, because I know that when I was often like getting involved with women who were like, in relationships or whatever, it was because I knew, or I was at least pretty sure that it was going to keep me from not having to commit. You kind of get everything you want. You get the attention, you get the excitement of I'm sneaking around, like you get that excitement. That excitement is worth something. It's not worth anything really meaningful, but it's worth something as far as like dopamine and like, oh shit, like I can't be with this woman. There's like something in our way, and I've been with it. Like one of my exes, her and I, like, we fell in love. We were together for years. We started out in a situation where we both were flirting a lot, and she was involved with another guy for 2 years. And then her and I just fell in love. And there was this moment where she told me, I'm not leaving him. Like, there's no way I'm leaving him. And I couldn't understand why. I was just like, why? You have to leave him. Like, whatever. She ended up leaving him, and then we ended up being in a really long-term relationship. But the other thing is, sometimes when you're the other person, it's hard. Like sometimes you're tricked into believing you're truly in love, like because the excitement of, oh my God, like we're building something and it feels so good, but we can't be with each other. Like that struggle and that toxicity is like sometimes very often mistaken for love. You know, it feels like infatuation. In the beginning, it's very hard to tell the difference between infatuation and love, you know? Like if you go in your pocket and you try to like take out change and one's a penny and one's a dime, you can't really tell. You just like, you're like kind of feeling around there, like really trying to play with them and like whatever. It's a little like a clit, you know what I'm saying? Except I could find the change eventually. I think oftentimes infatuation and love feel very similar. And so anytime more toxicity is added or more longing or more like you can have me, you can't have me, you can have me, you can't have me, that will give another point for the infatuation side. If we put love on one side, infatuation on the other, and we tally, you're going to tally one more mark every time for infatuation, every single time the situation gets more difficult or there's more obstacles to be overcome. And love is more like genuine, like care and like connection and some level of being realistic and growing together. So those two things can on I think on the surface level can feel very similar to one another. So I think a lot of times, like I had a buddy, he was hooking up with this girl in a relationship for like 8 months and was like literally talking to me about it every night. And he was like, I want to be with this girl so badly. She won't leave her boyfriend. I'm like madly in love with her. Like, can't she see how good we are together? And this went on for 8 months. He was like, there were times I had to come over and like comfort him because of how depressed he was about the situation. She ends up leaving the guy. And he said the second he found out she left the guy, he was like, oh, fuck, what did I do? Literally, like the whole 8 months, he was like, I need to find a way to get her to leave her man. Finally did. And that is the making and the characteristics of infatuation, right? It's fucking not healthy. It's like, and it makes you think things with so much conviction, you believe these things, and like, it's fucked up. In most of the situations that I was involved in the past with girls who had like boyfriends or who were married or whatever. There was definitely a lot more boyfriends than girls who were married. That only happened a couple times, but I'm bragging that it only happened a couple times. I'm like, look at how fucking good of a person I am, man. It was just like, there's just like 3-4 times that she was actually married. But I think like most of the time I went in for the fun of it. I went in because it just added a layer of fun that, particularly when you're not fully wanting a commitment or something real, it just adds like, again, a layer of excitement, and as a package deal, it's great. It's like she's not only hot, like she's not only fun, she also has this other thing in her life that draws me in and that I have to overcome because, like I said, you know, many times people want inherently what they can't have, right? I mean, like, it's like there's no way to like logically talk yourself out of that. I mean, like, because emotionally you just have this kind of like gravitational pull towards things that feel like they're a little out of your reach. And so that was the draw for me a lot. And again, like I'm pretty honest about this, even though it makes me feel like a piece of shit to admit it to myself. A lot of it was like, let me see how powerful I am. There's a power aspect to it. There's like, I could rattle this whole shit and I'm that good. That's how desirable I am. It's like, it's a real piece of shit move, but it also taught me a lot about people, myself and people that I've been involved with in that way. And then sometimes you fall in love. And look, like I said, my ex who I was with for years, it started in a similar way. And we ended up getting into, you know, very long-term relationship, which didn't result in marriage, so probably at the end was, I'm sure she, you know, might have thought it was a waste, but I didn't. And I've had a couple guys contact me because they found stuff that their girlfriends were doing with me, like found text messages or whatever, which are scary moments, honestly, like, and kind of rattled me and shook me a little, which I think they should. But I would have never, under any circumstance, no matter how much I like loved a girl, like fell in love with a girl who had a boyfriend or a husband or whatever it was, like I just can't ever imagine myself going in there and disrupting it. And you're also hurting the guy. Like again, like I'm all for being honest, but I just don't think it's your honesty to distribute. I always said, and I said in the cheating episode, and I think I've said it throughout the podcast, that like there is some responsibility from the man's part. I have arguments with my buddies about this all the time. She's like, yeah, like if she's cheating on you, it's completely her fault. And it is her fault. She's obviously making the choice to betray you or whatever. But I think as a man, like I bet you if the other guys on the end were paying attention somewhat, they would have probably, gotten some idea that something was going on. And maybe the two guys that contacted me, they probably did, right? But for your wife to be cheating on you for a year straight, and the way you find out is the guy comes forward and calls you and tells you, like, there had to have been something missing on his end emotionally to not pick up on anything. I mean, like, look, are there women who are like ninjas with cheating? Like, sure, I guess a very small percentage, I guess. Like I said, women are very emotional. So like, I think it's some responsibility on your end to kind of pay attention and to what's going on. Because a woman is not having sex with you does not mean in any way that she's cheating on you. But I have to imagine that the women who are cheating are probably having a lot less sex with their husbands or boyfriends. Most women I've talked to my entire life don't want to sleep with two men simultaneously at once consistently anyway. I mean, I'm not saying women won't sleep with this guy and then next week sleep with another guy, but like to have two simultaneous sexual relationships going and going and going, I just don't think is super common for women. So I think one sexual experience dries up a little bit. And I think in that situation where the woman's cheating and having sex with another guy, the husband, aside from, along with not with getting cheated on, is probably just also not having sex a lot with her. I think in most cases, if a woman is cheating on her husband, she's emotionally invested enough in the other person she's cheating with that becomes her main focus. She goes back to her home and takes care of the kids and lays in bed next to the husband and does all the things that probably appearance-wise she would need to do in order to have the relationship continue to go on, because clearly she's not ready to get out of it, because if she was, she would. But I do believe that because emotions are much more tied to sex with women than they are with men, when a woman's stepping outside the relationship, I think that the man probably becomes a much, much, much bigger priority sexually in her life than her husband currently is. Again, like, that's on him to realize and address with his wife. Now, I'm not saying it doesn't work the other way. I'm not saying that, like, when a man's cheating, he's not prioritizing the other woman over his own wife as far as sex goes. But like I said, I think men compartmentalize a lot more as far as like emotional needs and sexual needs go. So I just think that a man will probably do a much better job of sustaining that type of betrayal less obviously. So I have no idea, being the other guy, how she was handling her own relationship with her boyfriend at the time or whatever. But I have to imagine that there was like a dip in her attentiveness to the relationship and her sex life with him and whatever. So, I've heard women say very much like women love sex as much as men, or women need sex just as much as men do. Men have sex to have sex. And I think a lot of times women have sex as a vehicle to pull a guy in. I've seen so many scenarios in relationships in the past where, like, there was one relationship I was in, like I said, with my almost fiance. I had stopped watching porn. I decided, like, I'm going to be faithful. I'm not messing around anymore outside of relationships. Like I made those changes in my life, with help of a lot of therapy and whatever. I got into the relationship, and as I mentioned in another episode, I wanted to have sex all the time, and I felt like I needed to have sex all the time in order to sustain myself sexually and be satisfied, because I had just wiped away the possibility of other women on the side and porn. So the idea of sex became even more important than it ever was. It's almost like sometimes when you're pressuring women to have sex or like showing how eager you are to do it, the part of them that wanted to conquer you is stripped away. There's so many aspects to having sex, and only one of them is the physical act of sex, right? There's desire, there's longing, there's power. There's so many things that are involved with sex, and so many things that people get out of sex. And just the act of having an orgasm, if you're a man, because women won't, just the act of finishing is, or the act of sex alone is such a small part of the benefits of sex as a whole. A lot of times sex is like, it's not about having sex. One person's desire for the other person and the other person's desire for the other person link up and come together at the right time. Like that's why like a lot of the time like people will have sex like crazy in the beginning of a relationship, and then it'll sort of like calm down a little bit. There's two things going on. First of all, like the novelty is gone because now you're like spending all this time together. So that's the obvious one. But I've seen like a lot of my guy friends, and myself included, get into relationships, and the woman wants to have sex a lot in the beginning, and then it kind of calms down. And by the way, same on my end. Like I don't feel that desire to have sex every second the way I did, and whatever. Again, it's like a new thing's a new thing, and then it becomes not new. What's been interesting in the past is like I would like make a move, let's say, and then like she'd be like, "Oh, I'm not in the mood" or whatever, and I'd be like, "Okay, like." That sucks. And obviously as a man, you're disappointed, especially if you thought you were going to have sex. You get disappointed by her not wanting to. But there were times where I would get discouraged, and I was like, okay, well, I guess I'm just like not going to like make a move, because nobody wants to get turned down. Nobody wants to feel rejection, especially from in a relationship. And then what happens sometimes, what I've seen happen with women and in my friends' relationships too, is that like if they stop making a move as much, the woman starts getting concerned, and she's like, well, why isn't he making a move? So it's almost like the desire for a man to want to have sex with a woman sometimes feels like enough for the woman. It's almost like the sex itself, the physical act of sex itself, isn't quite as important. And I know women love orgasms as rare as they happen, and I know that it's still important to women to have sex and that it feels good, but I do think that a lot of times what a woman is looking for is the validation that the man wants to have sex with her. I've heard many examples throughout the years of my buddies who were like, I keep trying to have sex with her and she's like never in the mood. And then they kind of just stop because they're like, I don't want to get rejected again a million times in a row. And the woman's kind of like, what's going on here? Like, how come this guy's not making a move? And then all of a sudden you're not as sure of a bet, or she doesn't feel like quite as safe in the situation. And so she'll make the move. And all of a sudden she'll buy the lingerie, and it's fucked up. It's psychological. But that's my whole point, is like when a woman steps outside of her marriage or her relationship and starts sleeping with another guy, or even like gets to the point where it's like they may sleep together, they may not. There's a psychological element oftentimes of she feels so unbelievably safe in the relationship and knows he's never leaving and never going anywhere, that she feels she could kind of dip her toe into the water. Whereas if she started to maybe feel like, oh, something's going on, he's not as into it or whatever, she may actually have less attention to give to the other guy and may want to actually pull back and come back to her marriage. And again, all of this is morally wrong, but I'm just saying from a psychological standpoint, this is where I feel a lot of things play out. Do women love sex as much as men? The physical act, I do not believe so. Do they need sex as much as men? On average, I also do not believe so. Do they need the validation to know that a man that they're into wants to have sex with them? They may need it more than we do. Women need to feel that you want them. They need to feel desired. And both scenarios from a man can make a woman, like, there's obviously a multitude of factors for why people cheat, right? It's never just like one thing. But let's talk about like when a woman steps outside of a relationship, oftentimes it's because at the end of the day, she doesn't respect you. But respect and lack thereof can come from a number of different places. But I think the vast majority of women who step outside of their serious relationships to have sex with another guy, I think the vast majority do it because of boredom more commonly than because the guy steps outside of the relationship and has sex with someone else. I would say in most cases when a woman steps outside of a marriage or serious relationship, it's because she felt like she could do better than you the entire time and now got an opportunity with someone that she considers to be better than you. I think that's more common than, oh, she found you texting another guy. I'm not saying that doesn't happen. I'm not saying that if a woman's completely locked in love with her man and she finds out that he cheats, yeah, obviously she's going to creak the door open a little bit more than she would have before that, for sure. But I'm talking about the scenarios where a woman's just bored. And like we said, the mass majority of women settle with guys that they're not so crazy about. You could do anything to a woman but bore her, right? That was that Javier Bardem line from that movie, The Counselor, which I think about all the time. For whatever reason, whenever I had been involved in a situation where I was the other guy and she was in a relationship or whatever, I never, ever, 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 ever got the sense that it was because she was trying to get back at this guy because he did something wrong, like because he stepped outside of the relationship. It was always my feeling. Again, I don't know everything that's going on, but just my instincts told me that it was almost always because she was just like, I'm not like that crazy about this dude. That's where the guy's responsibility has to come in. Because if you get a woman to the point where she's so not crazy about you or so bored to the point that she's actually going to go do something like that, you had to have been missing signs, dude. There's no way you didn't. You really clearly weren't paying enough attention. And if you were emotionally aware enough to figure this out, you probably would have been the type of guy that would have excited her enough to begin with for her to not have gotten to that place, if that makes sense. My point is, guys, try to be more emotionally aware. Try to be more honest with where you think you are and where the relationship is. And please, don't get involved with married women or women in relationships as best you can anyway. But if you were a scumbag like me for many years who had no desire to actually really commit to anything real, and you have to be a fucking asshole and get it out of your system, please, for God's sakes, do not go to the other guy about it. Please, that's her job. Let her get caught with your name all over it, fine. He should be contacting you, okay? Listen, the only way that you should ever talk to the guy who's romantically involved with the girl that you're seeing on the side is if he contacts you. If I didn't hear from those other two guys, I would have never contacted them myself, okay? It's one thing to be on the receiving end of it. It's another thing to be the initiator and be like, I'm going to go fuck up both of their lives and their kids' lives. There's actually a real selfishness to that also, just to for you be the one taking matters in your own hand and going, anyway.
But Eric, what if she's taking forever to get caught?
Well, that's the other thing. Now, the question that John just asked is, what if she's taking forever to get caught? And you're waiting around, you want to date this woman. This is like the love of your life, you found yourself in this uncomfortable situation, unfortunate circumstances in which she's already taken, but this is your soulmate, and she knows it and you know it, but she doesn't know how to get out of the situation, and then she's taking so long to get caught. I mean, that is kind of the nice thing. That is oftentimes the end to a lot of these relationships where people are being unfaithful, is the person gets caught and it blows up, and that's usually the end of it. I mean, sometimes it's just like, all right, like, will you get caught already? Like how long do I have to wait for you to get caught? We've been going on with this for a year. I'm kind of ready to move on at this point. Can you just get caught? Because then I have to break up with you, and then you're a married woman or you're a woman in a relationship, and now you're going through a breakup. I have to break you up, and now you have to be left with your husband. God forbid the other guy breaks up with you and you have to be left with your boyfriend that you've been with for 5 years. That would be really unfortunate. So just, can we get caught? You blow up your own life. Maybe he contacts me. I have to block you. We never talk again. Your life is in disarray. You have to figure out whether your husband's going to stay with you or whether you have to work on it or not. The point is that it's not my responsibility, and I'm not getting involved in that shit other than the fact that I'm fully involved in it already. The point is this. If you find yourself in one of these really messy situations, you have to work it out among, the two of you. You can't be the one to go to that other person's family. And you know what? If you give it a shot and you try to get her to break up with him or whatever, first of all, I also just think it comes back to like being desperate and pathetic to try to beg somebody to be with you in any circumstance. So even if she feels like she's in kind of a chokehold because she's married and she's really in love with you and you're really in love with her, but she doesn't want to leave, don't let her leave. Just let her. That's what she felt like she needed to do, dude. You can't convince anybody to be with you in any circumstance. So if you're the other person, also take these principles and these philosophies of, I still need to keep my self-respect and not feel like I'm pressuring anybody to be with me because it's ultimately their decision. So let people make their own decisions and you do your best to react however they choose. Anyway, thank you so much for tuning into another episode of Something with Eric Newman. Happy New Year, and we're happy to be back. Shout out to my usual crew, John, Zoran. More to come in 2026. Peace from the Comedy Cellar.